You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Yo, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have on my buddy Wesley White. Wesley, he's a diehard fly fisherman, and he's super skilled behind the lens, both video and photography. I fished with him a couple days, and then we did a trip together, fished for steelhead. Some of the images and the videos he came up with are just absolute next level. But I had him on the podcast today to talk about some of his South American adventures. So the last couple years, he's been traveling down to South America, down to the jungle down there. And we talk about the whole jungle experience just with snakes and bugs, bullet ants, like all kinds of stuff that we get into just about the experience down in the jungle. But then the fish that he gets to fish for down there, the Dorado, just these golden this fish. Well, you guys have probably seen Dorado, but oh my god, that is the top of my list right now, just because the golden color. They're just this beautiful, big, hard fighting, aggressive fish, and then the rivers that they live in and their size. It's just incredible to hear about the tactics down there, the fight on those things. But we get into all South American species. We talk payara, we talk peacock bass, talk a lot about Dorado because I'm super interested in it, but it is just absolutely fascinating. So I want to thank Wesley White again for coming on the podcast, sharing his experiences down there. I really enjoyed it, and I know you guys are going to enjoy it too. So Eastman's Flycast is the new title of this podcast. If you like it, subscribe to it, rate and review. That really helps me out. This is a new venture for me, so trying to build an audience here and just trying to get on the best guest possible to make for an entertaining conversation, and also have help motivate you to get out or get on the vise again. It's so fun to be on the river. I've been hitting it like crazy here lately. Caught a really nice one. When was that? Thursday after work. I think I landed 3 over 20 on this little black streamer I've been doing good on, but I landed one really nice 22-inch big male head on it. Just a really nice fish. So it's been super fun. Fish this weekend, trying to split time between bear season and fly fishing now as bear season's starting to heat up, but there is some dang good fly fishing to be had. I've caught some fish on a dry fly now. I got in a blue wing olive hatch the other day that was just nuts with these big brown trout eating. So much fun. Just going to try to get the most out of it here in Montana, and really looking forward to some of these hatches. I've got into some squalla hatches on a couple different rivers now. So, yeah, just really having fun fly fishing and sharing the journey with you guys and having some of these in-depth conversations and just trying to hit my stride here at the Flycast. So thanks a bunch for all the support, you guys. I really appreciate the support there, support on IG, and really hoping we can build a podcast out of this thing. So let's get right into it. Eastman's Flycast. Wesley White is the guest today. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go. Dude, you take some awesome photos. They're out of this world. You were so skilled behind the lens. Both that and then, your videos and how good you are with your editing. You can just put together a quick film, that would take me weeks to put together half of that type of project. It's just amazing. So you put out some great products, man.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So dude, you've been traveling like crazy, like some of these adventures that you've been able to go on and have. It's a group of friends, right, that you're going with, guys that you know down there?
Well, I've gone to a couple locations now, and they have been connections made by the original spot I went. I went down to, Bolivia and shot down there 2 years ago, and that was kind of my first South American adventure. And through Angling Frontiers, the Dorado location in Bolivia, I connected with Beto, the owner of Fish Colombia. So then I got to go there this February and do a month there. So I've spent 2 months in Bolivia and now a month in Colombia with the two different operations, and it's kind of a group of friends down there now that I always look forward to going down and seeing.
Man, how cool. Traveling just broadens our perspective so much. And I've only traveled to, one or two other countries in my entire life, but I gotta imagine South America is just way different than we do things up here.
Absolutely. It's such a beautiful place and so diverse. Every country has different ethnic groups within their countries, whether they're indigenous or, Spanish arrival or something along those lines. And just this massive mix of cultures. And I get to experience both. Oftentimes the fishing operations are in indigenous areas because those are the untouched areas. They haven't had quite as much agriculture or resource development going on there. So you'll, fly in for like Colombia into Bogota, and it's, probably a lot like any Spanish city in Spain. It's a lot of fair-skinned people, a lot of Spanish culture and Spanish cuisine. Hop on a little tiny charter plane a few hours into the jungle, and suddenly it's, you're eating fish over a fire with plantain, and you're right in the indigenous culture where you're casting a fly rod on a rock and there's a guy bow fishing for his daily meal right next to you, just hanging out. Yeah, you get thrown right into it. So you do get this perspective of how everybody else lives their lives, and we don't see it quite as much here because, our indigenous populations have integrated to, the levels they're at now. But down there, a matter of a few hours, you go from technology and cell phones and everything the modern world offers to you're right in the jungle, and it's as primitive and as possible, really.
What a great escape. Like us, we need that as humans away from this technology. As good as it is, gosh, it feels so good to get away from it and connect with their environment. But that jungle ecosystem, that's not an easy ecosystem either. The bugs and the heat and humidity, man, and that
Absolutely.
it's got to be just teeming with life. I know those jungles. Anytime I get into them, like just even the sounds around, like the woods are just going crazy at night and mornings and evenings. Um, it's got to be kind of a shock to the system just because everything is so new down there. I've never seen the plants, I've never seen the fish, the river, the indigenous people. Like it's I just imagine it blowing my mind once I go down there and trying to, and then the fly fishing, like some of those fish, those Dorado. Uh, some of your footage of those things, like hooking those things and how acrobatic they are and where they sit in the runs and eating those big streamers. I can't imagine there's something that's much more fun than fishing for a Dorado.
It's probably my favorite fish now. It's given its entire environment where it lives, and the style of fishing for it. It's like you could go to any trout stream in Montana that kind of runs down out of the mountains, the Boulder or something, the West Fork of the Madison, and take that beautiful crystal clear water and replace a few things, put jungle around it instead of our pine forest, replace a few colors here and there, but otherwise it's that crystal clear, beautiful water. And it's these little runs like the Gallatin or something. It's not an overwhelming volume of water. And so all of the things that a fly fisherman loves, it just starts to add up. You've got wadeable water that's kind of warm. It's a little chilly, but it's pretty warm. And so you're never necessarily at risk of getting swept off your feet, and you can swim wherever. You're sight fishing. The fish are very visible almost every time. Occasionally you're blind casting, especially if it rains, but otherwise, occasionally you're working a deep run that you can't get a sight down into, but most of the time you're creeping up over boulders and you peek up into the run and there's two, 20-pound fish or a 10-pound and a 20-pound or a group of 5-pounders, and every single rapid holds another group that are waiting to ambush their prey that moves through the rapids. Constant action, it feels like. You're always really excited to get to the next run. A lot of times you lose the fish, you'll spook them. They're really smart. I'm sure there's predators, jaguars, things that hunt them in the water. So they're also a little bit on the lookout. But you finally make a cast. They're not crazy long casts, 30, 40 feet. sight casting, and then you're hooked up on, potentially a 10 to 30 pound fish in water that here in our trout streams, you're excited if maybe a 3 to 5 pounder eats your fly. Down there, if you catch a 3 to 5 pounder, it might not survive you bringing it in, because there's going to be a wolf pack of 10 pounders and 20 pounders right behind it trying to eat it off your fly line. The whole experience is shocking, somewhat familiar, but it's just, it kind of, I don't like to say it ruins other styles of fishing, but it definitely pins in your mind as a very spectacular type of fly fishing.
Yeah, that is so wild, man. I love your description of it, and I love how skills and water and everything transposes to a different place. You just replace kind of the setting and maybe, like you say, the jungle or the noises, but there's still fish, they're still sitting in those runs, and then trying to present to them. Man, that just sounds like a ride. Okay, I didn't know that most of them were sight fish too, that you can just see them down in there, and then you're trying to lay a cast in front of them where you strip right by them, right, and try to get them to grab it.
For sure, they're very aggressive, so it's possible to scare them by throwing the fly on their head. The streamer is a 5/0 hook, a big predator hook, and the fly is anywhere from, they don't have to be crazy large, and in fact, too large will scare them even more, but something from 4 inches to 7 inches. So if you slap that down right on their head, they'll burst and kind of run out of the pool. But otherwise, they're gold and they're kind of sand colored, and they're hanging out and they're waiting to ambush a migratory fish called sabalo, which is a sucker fish, a bottom feeder, and suspended stuff in the water. The indigenous people live off those too, and like salmon, millions of these things move up from the major river systems to spawn in these high mountain rivers throughout the eastern side of the Andes, where they pour down into Bolivia. And the Dorado follow them. And not just Dorado, but multiple species of catfish, some of them reaching 200 pounds. You might have a 200-pound catfish laying in a pool that's 4.5 feet, 5 feet deep, and only 50 yards across, and it's stuck there until the next high water comes through. And they're all feeding on these millions of suckerfish that move through, which are kind of a silver color. So you're tying gray and black and silver and red flies presented upstream, and the minute it hits the water, you can tarpon strip, or you've got the rod in your armpit. You can keep the rod tip low and strip single-handed, but either way, what you're trying to do is stay focused, because a lot of people will trout set. The action happens right at your feet. And because of that visual explosion just right there at your feet, a lot of people rip the rod up into the air because they want to set the hook on that fish. Sometimes you're setting the hook a few feet off the tip of your rod, because they're chasing it. The water's that skinny and you're moving it that fast that they'll sometimes beach up onto the gravel trying to get your fly. And then once you hook into them, you just set the hook as many times as you can. You just keep ripping on that thing until you've got line burn, and that fish is stuck, because it's going to jump 5 or 6 times, and throw the hook if you haven't got that big hook to penetrate through its mouth. Dorado don't inhale a fly, they bite it. So they will actually close the back of their throat while their jaw hinges even wider. They have a hinge in the middle of their jaw, so their jaw will expand and their mouth will become larger. And when they bite, it kind of sounds like a steel trap snapping shut, and they're biting your fly. So if you don't really get that hook set, they haven't sucked it down into their throat, or they're not trying to really swallow it. They're just trying to bite it and rip it to pieces, rip chunks of flesh off of it. You lose a lot of them on the jumps or trout set. Everybody gets real nervous and trout sets right at their feet. It's bound to happen. And then once you hook into one, though, it's quite a ride. They're jumping all over. You're just cranking that 9 or 10 weight rod as hard as you can to keep them from going down river, because if they get into those little rapids and keep running you, well, you get a belly in the line and they jump and throw the hook. So it's fast-paced action. you're moving that fly fast, and once they hook on, it's again still a lot of action. Just bang, bang, bang. You're trying to set that hook.
Man, yeah, it sounds like the strip is like fishing salt, where you got to strip really fast. The faster you can strip, the better they like it. And I like the one-handed big strip, big long strips, but I know what you mean, like where you tuck it under and use the double hand strip. Guys are
Yeah.
pretty good at that too. And then the trout set is the worst. We build those habits over years of setting that hook, and boy, you get on those big fish or you get to the salt and you can't help yourself. You make a couple bad mistakes, especially when you can see them and see all the action. It's so exciting down there, and you lift up and then instantly he's gone. You just don't hook them the same in the top of their mouth. So it sounds like you're strip setting them, and then when you're setting 4, 5, 6 times, are you pulling that rod straight back, trying to set that hook? Okay.
Yeah, I'm really, I can explain the leader setup a little bit. Very simple. I take the Scientific Angler 50-pound or 60-pound fluoro. I just make a loop in one end and a loop in the other, or I double uni it to, maybe 2 feet of wire. So your leader is 3 feet of mono, 2 feet of wire. I use the Scientific Angler wire and leader, and it's a real simple 2-line setup there. You can do a knot onto your fly there. And, so with these fish and stripping and really getting them in there and getting the hook set, I kind of prefer the stripping it under my armpit a little bit more. It's comfortable after all day stripping. You kind of start to throw your shoulder out when you're doing the one hand, and
Okay.
you'll notice like the GT guys, the giant trevally guys, you'll see them fishing it like that a lot. And once you kind of adopt that into your stripping for those large predatory fish, like you mentioned saltwater, I really see a lot of GT tarpon guys. That's how they're stripping. And it gives you a lot of opportunity to really keep setting that hook. And because you got both hands on the line, I'm almost waiting to feel a tension and after you've felt a lot of fish, you kind of start to feel it, like there's a certain amount of stretch that you feel and in your leader and in your line, where it's like, okay, any more and I might sever a loop off the end, I might break a knot, and I will pull and pull and pull as hard as I can, basically until, you feel that breaking point, because that's what you want to make sure that hook's in there. And finessing it, you got 60-pound fluoro and 40-pound wire and a 5/0 hook. There's no point in trying to finesse it. That fish ate that fly, so just keep slamming it home. If you're one-handed stripping, keep gaining line and make sure you've got line control. Keep pulling with your right or left hand that has the rod in it and keep setting that hook. And you're going to get line burn. You're going to have line cut through your glove. After some of these trips, 1 month in Colombia or 1 month in Bolivia, and the fly line will just chew right through a pair of fishing gloves. The leather's gone, and then eventually it's cutting through the material and you're putting tape over a glove that's been cut by fly line. That's how hard you want to set that hook, so that when they start to pull some of that line, it's really a lot of tension on it. They have bony plates in their mouth like tarpon. There's not just kind of like loose flesh for it to get a hold of. You're not really going to hook them in the tongue like maybe a trout. You're punching through bone, and you're trying to punch a big hook through bone. So you're really setting the hook hard. Odds are you're not going to break that fly line or break that leader material, but you might lose that fish. So I'll set the hook just, until I feel there's no more line to gain, and I've got to start letting the fish take some back because it's just stalled in the water, and one big hard turn and it might break a knot. So you're really setting the hook hard. I mean, there's quite a bit of emphasis on that, whether it's payara or peacock bass or sardinata or any of these big Amazon fish, Dorado, that you see people fishing for. Keep setting the hook until you think you're going to break a knot for sure. And then you can put some, backbone into the rod and start letting them run a little bit and play with them. But otherwise, make sure you got that hook set, because you might lose a fish you traveled 3,000 miles to catch, and that's your fish of a lifetime.
Copy. All about the hook set. All about
Yeah.
getting that hook buried in there so then you can fight that fish so he doesn't throw it. And you say it's the same across all species. And so you mentioned a few other killer aggressive fish there with the peacock bass and the payara. Man, there is just it's a whole different ecosystem down there.
Yeah, everything's feeding off of one another, and we don't really quite see that up here in the Northwest. We're so fortunate. You can go hunting, you can go fishing, the water's clean, you can kind of take a nap in the woods, and granted there's bears and stuff, but other than that, most guys hunting and stuff are taking naps. Most guys fishing are just kind of hanging out. You go down there and you got to be on your toes. Everything is surviving off the thing next to it. So you fall asleep in the wrong spot and you're going to have a spider or an ant or a caterpillar, something you don't want on you. The water doesn't always have the safest things in it, so you want to be cautious. You've got caiman, stingray. That's probably the number one thing you're on the lookout for, a stingray in the water. And then all the fish are eating each other. So you've got Dorado that just have unbelievable crushing power and tearing power to their jaws, a lot like maybe some sort of monitor lizard or dinosaur. And then you've got peacock bass. They're a cichlid. They're not really a bass. They're an enormous species of cichlid. But because of the way they, inhale, their mouth opens, they look just like a big mouth bass, and that's the name they've gotten stuck with. Payara, or I believe it's more pronounced payara, have just like deep sea monster fangs. Their mouth really has no close to it as far as like lips sealing the mouth. It's just a jaw full of long, pointed, dagger-like teeth that range from 1/2 inch to 2 inches. And they have all got these really hard mouths. I think it's, they're eating bait fish. They're eating things that could potentially damage the inside of their mouths. And you've got to get a big hook through there or they'll throw it. And oftentimes that's where you're losing them is you think you've got the hook set. You feel the power. You feel the weight. You feel the 10 weight bending, trying to bend into the cork, and you think, well, there they are. Obviously, I've got them. So you put them on the backbone of the rod, and they jump. Most of the fish down there jump. They're warm water species. They don't deoxygenate easy. And they'll jump and throw the hook, and you just don't quite realize. Same with tarpon. Lost a lot of tarpon doing the same thing. Just because you feel them eat doesn't mean that hook is set. And you've just got to keep setting the hook until you're as positive as can be that there's no way that needle point on a hook has done anything other than puncture through that bone, and now you're going to hold on to them tight.
Man, makes sense. I'm same way on those tarpon. I'm yet to land one because I just don't get that hook buried in there good enough, and then they go on a couple jumps, and then I lose them.
Absolutely.
So I understand completely what you're saying about that, but it's different in theory than it is in practice. I'm sure when you're down there and you're burning your hands with that line trying to just rip at that thing, and you think you got him, and then he comes off. So yeah, I can understand that. You talk about that ecosystem and like being comfortable down there. That jungle's wild. Like you sit still at all, and you could have a spider on you, or a bullet ant, or whatever the case is. Even more so than around here. I'd imagine you really got to keep your head on a swivel down there and be safe. You're so many miles away from home, and in that jungle. I know even around here on adventures, like whether it's backcountry hunting or whether it's backcountry fishing, you don't know when you're going to get into a portage. A guy misses a couple dips on the sticks, and all of a sudden you're up against a rock. Like, it really is. You are relying upon your own skills and keeping your mind right to make good decisions. And I think it'd even be more so exaggerated down in that jungle where everything does want to eat you. Those bugs are poisonous down there. It is a different place. It's got to be a little weird the first few days to get used to it, I would imagine.
Yeah, you go through some kind of stages of understanding and kind of accepting that responsibility that now you are in a place that a little bit of negligence, a little bit of too carefreeness, playing around, and something could get you that you're being life flighted out of there. And some of the areas of the jungle, you're too far really to be saved if you get seriously injured. Some other areas, they could get a helicopter in there maybe and save you if the weather's good and everything. But you've got multiple species of spiders, snakes, obviously, the ants, as you've mentioned as well, caterpillars. And all of these insects at any given time could really end your entire fishing trip. And you'll see them. You often do see them. It's not really that they're just like maybe this species of insect or spider or snake lives in the jungle, but if we're cautious, we'll never run into them. Every night when the sun goes down, the snakes come out. And when you're staying in Bolivia or Colombia or Brazil, it doesn't matter, Peru, if you're somewhere that has venomous snakes during the high temperatures of the day in the sun, they disappear for the most part. When the sun goes down, they all make their way for the water to eat frogs and lizards and rodents, anything else that's down there. So almost every night there's incidences with snakes where you're moving them out of camp, or sometimes they need to be terminated because they are such a highly venomous species that you can't really throw them into the bushes. The indigenous people that live there, I might be on the ground taking a photo of a spider I find fascinating, and suddenly somebody's smushing it with their bow because they just don't mess with it. For me, what is a great photo opportunity to an indigenous person who's like maybe my porter for the day, who's carrying my dive housing or carrying whatever, they often get a little bit intimidated by how close I'm willing to get to insects or a snake or something, because to me it's fascinating. And I'm being a little bit reckless probably, because to me, I know this whole world of medicine exists that I'm thinking will save me, and that doesn't exist for them. So they remove spiders and snakes and things like that quickly. You come home, and I still, if I put my shoes on without dumping them out, I have a little bit of a quick race in my heart. I suddenly remember I just put my boots on and I did not flip them upside down. Of course, in my home, I have nothing to worry about. But a month ago, I had left a pair of shoes sitting on the deck in Colombia, where it was 100 degrees roughly every day, very, very hot. I put a pair of wet shoes on the ground, and in the morning, fire ants had moved under the sole, and there was hundreds of them drinking the water from in my shoe, because I carried it, from the river. I brought water into the jungle where they didn't have any, these insects. And I go to just casually put my shoe on, and there's one on my hand, and I think, whoa, that's weird. So I flip the shoe over and I give it a smack out on the planks of the wood on the deck, and just hundreds of fire ants pour out of my shoe that I was moments away from sticking my foot into at 5 o'clock in the morning, running for the boats, trying to get everything going after I got all my gear together and barely ate breakfast. And I'm a step behind everybody, and I get ready to throw my shoes on. It's full of fire ants. And that, likely would have been something that sent me home. One ant bite, probably not. A whole foot covered in bites, depending on how the swelling and the fever went afterwards, I'd probably be on my way to the hospital in Bogota or the closest city, whatever it may be. Some people do get hurt, unfortunately, and it ends their trips. You just really want to be cautious. Always keep your tent closed. Always try to keep your shoes and your clothing in a way that you can check it in the morning before you put it on. Something as simple as hanging your shirt out on the peg of a tree for the night to dry, and you're going to put it back on in the morning. You might have had a small spider move into the sleeve for the night, and you need to every day check all your clothing, everything that you're going to put on, and make sure something didn't get in there in the middle of the night while you were sleeping.
Oh, that's wild, Wes. You just can't get complacent out there, man. I mean, everything's trying to eat you, prick you, or poke you out there. So, yeah, you just can't get complacent. You got to take care of your gear every day, make sure everything's zipped up, or it could be your whole trip. I really like how you were saying your porters stomp on the spiders that you're trying to get close to and take photos of those snakes and those spiders. The one thing I do know about you is that you really immerse yourself in the experience and enjoy wherever you're at that present moment. So I can just picture you in that jungle. I'd be the same way. It's stuff I've just never seen. It just blow my mind, just the flora, the fauna, the bug life, the fish. I just want to try to capture all of it. So that's really cool. It reminds me of something that I would do there in the jungle. But yeah, man, that seems like a wild place. So yeah, you just have to have your head on a swivel at all times down there, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I think we all get excited like that because we come from a place where we're spoiled by the safety net that is, modern convenience and medicine. So whether you're a photographer or not, you arrive in this area where there's this exotic flora and fauna that you've never seen before, except in, cinematic planet Earth. It makes it look the most beautiful thing in the world. So now you really got to see it. And the indigenous guys will be throwing rocks at a snake trying to cross the river and get into the area you're fishing. And while they're throwing rocks, all of the tourists, or myself included, we're all trying to crowd the shore because we're trying to get pictures of whatever's, in the water or on the sand or in the tree. And these guys are trying to get it out of there because part of their job, and oftentimes these fishing locations hire indigenous workers, oftentimes part of their job is they're caretakers for us. And they're trying to make sure there's no spiders wandering through camp. There's not a lot of leaf litter out that attracts snakes and stuff to ambush from. Because they want to make sure that people do have a good time, and they're so you kind of got people always watching you, and these locations do a good job of making sure there's kind of always somebody there that is a local guy who is going to stop you from getting a little too excited and trying to play with a poisonous frog or a snake or a spider or stingray, whatever you might come across. They're always there to kind of slow down the tourists, and we all get really excited to go play with something they would have killed the minute they saw it.
Yeah, it looks like top-notch operations. Just through following you, I follow the other pages and a couple of these companies that you've been down to photograph for and things. It looks like they do a really good job down there, offering a great experience. I just don't. That's just not something you can do on a do-it-yourself down there. You need those guys and those indigenous people to show you the way down there. So, can you mention those operations one more time, Wesley?
Absolutely. In Bolivia, it's Angling Frontiers, and they're the Dorado location that's located in what's called the Beni region of Bolivia, and that's the indigenous area, the high mountain Dorado fishing. And then in Colombia, it's called Fish Colombia, and he's got multiple locations, so you really kind of can see all parts of Colombia fishing with Beto and his operation, where he's got a Pacific Coast location, which is in basically the lost coast of Colombia, and nothing was really established out there. And then the bass fishing, and he's got a new location he's opening, island of Providencia for flats fishing. So all these places are kind of in the jungle, and they're beautiful and exotic down there, and they really show you what they love. And these guys love their locations, and when you go, the owners are right there with you most of the time, and they're the best tour guides, and they're very passionate about the places that they operate.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, they're such beautiful fish. That golden Dorado. Oh, I don't think you could get a prettier fish than that one. But then it looks like you get to experience different locations in different rivers, like those payara. It looks like they like the rapids, like the really fast stuff. Are you also sight fishing for those, or are you just fishing in those giant rapids and the breaks in the current in there?
Unfortunately, they live in kind of turbid water, and you don't get the opportunity to say sight fish for them. But if they've moved into the right location, you get to target them based on really obvious holding water. So while it's not quite sight fishing, they're there, and you've just got to get that fly into their zone. And yeah, it might take 20 casts because you're shooting a 500 grain sinking line out into class 4 whitewater. But when it falls down into that seam, into their holding water, they'll just grab it right out of there, and they'll really put a bid in a 10-weight rod because they're down there below that really, hydraulic swirling water of the white water, and they're holding below it, eating bait fish, and you hook one below it. Now you've got to bring it back up through the water column. And they're a pretty amazing fish. You're wearing life jackets the whole time because a misstep might put you in the water. And the river we're fishing, the Orinoco River, is one of those that's one of the largest in the world. Up there with the Congo, the Amazon, the Columbia. So you've got some huge water, just unbelievable volume of water. And you're wearing a life jacket because sometimes you're in the boat, sometimes you're on the rocks, and they're just polished, smooth lava rock. And you hook into a 10-pound payara, and now you're kind of jumping around. And you want to be safe in that location because they definitely live in kind of more extreme water than, say, the bass or the Dorado.
Man, well, and they're just beautiful too. Just that bright silver fish, and then those vampire teeth that you talked about. Just those huge teeth in the front that go right up on the side of their mouths. They're wild looking fish.
Absolutely, they've got two front teeth that actually recess up into their top jaw. So they've got, if you catch a 20-pounder, they might have 2-inch long fangs. Those front fangs, and they'll disappear up into the front cavity of their face, and they'll close their mouth, and those two disappear up in there, and everything else lines up. And that's just for grabbing fish. You can tell that they're swallowing fish whole. There's no ripping them apart or anything. That mouth is just meant to grab a hold of one and not let go of it, and then gulp it right down the back. And as you mentioned, they're silver, but when you're holding them, they're blue. They've got just this unbelievable iridescent blue, like a brown trout gets, on the side of its face a little bit.
Yep.
And you get that real beautiful blue, but then they're slimy like bonefish. So you hug one and then you let it go and you look down at your shirt and it looks like you blew your nose all over your shirt and then you can't get it off for the rest of the day. So it's just like bonefish where you don't want to hug them because you're going to get covered in slime the rest of it. It'll never come off. It'll be there the rest of your fishing.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, very slimy fish.
And then the peacock bass, how are those to fish for? They seem really aggressive, seem like they sit in slower holding water, less of sight fishing, more blind casting, but they look like they hit and fight really hard too.
They are an aggressive fish. Where I was at, they do live in lagoons in a flooded area that is savanna, kind of the savanna of Colombia. It's a grassland. So you'll get into the lagoon and you're surrounded by trees and jungle, if you will, or there's jaguar and anything else that might move through there. But walk 100 yards through the trees and now you're in just desolate grassland. And these little lagoons spur off into those. So you'll be ripping up the river in a little john boat, just like you'd have here. Guy's got a 30 horsepower Yamaha on the back and you're ripping on this little john boat. And then a little entryway into this lagoon that looks like nothing more than a muddy, semi-flooded, entryway, I guess, kind of little tunnel into the trees. And he'll push the boat back in there and all of a sudden you pop out into this big lagoon and bass are blowing up in the back corner eating bait fish. And it's just like a feeding frenzy in one area. And then you get fishing, and you'll have big blow ups and everyone's trying to cast to that spot real quick. And you'll hook one, and then there'll be 3 or 4 more following it. So the opportunity for doubles is quite common with the peacock bass. So they kind of attack each other maybe, or they're following each other looking for more bait fish to consume. So once somebody hooks into one, everybody's kind of, how many people are in the boat, 1 or 2, you're kind of casting towards that guy's hookup because odds are there's another one there and you'll hook it too. And they are just rippers. They hit hard, and suddenly the rod will bend down deep into the water. They're known to break rods, fly rods, and spin fishing rods on that hit. And there's this shock where they just break everything. I was there for a month, and I probably saw a dozen rods break.
Oh, my gosh, Wes.
Fly rods. Those bass, when they hit, they bend it, man. And they'll put up a great fight. They'll jump, and then they'll kind of relent, and you bring them in, and they're just beautiful, big monsters, really cool colors, kind of every color of the rainbow, really. You're getting reds and blues, greens, yellow, orange, all on one fish. It's quite the color palette for them. But still the Dorado is my favorite, but those others, they're great fish to fish for. And the peacock bass, especially, the colors, the flies you get to throw are little for them, so it's like not exhausting. It's real mellow and you're just hanging out in the boat. You're not walk wading too much. So it's different types of fishing, but I'm addicted. I was supposed to go back to Colombia in May, and with the virus and everything the way it is right now, I had to cancel that trip, and we'll just reschedule that for later this fall. But I can't get enough of it down there.
Man, it sounds like it. Yeah, I can see why those Dorado, like after you explain it to me, I think they were my favorite before I talked to you, and now even more so after I talked to you. Just the setting and in those mountain streams, and and how big they get, and then the golden colors, sight fishing for them. It just doesn't sound like it gets any more exciting. And then hook onto one of those things and just into the fight of your life, it sounds like. So, man, that's wild. It sounds like you have a second home down there, and it's too bad you had to cancel that trip in May. But glad you get to go back in the fall again. Sounds like you can't get enough of that place, and I can understand why. It sounds like a fly fisherman's heaven down there.
Yeah, it really is. I need to keep working on my Spanish because I often find myself in lots of situations where it would be beneficial when I'm trying to get help from somebody. And sometimes these trips have a little bit of DIY to it when I'm bouncing around for a month in the country. And so I'm getting better at it, and I can ask questions that I basically can't understand the answer to. But after a while, the communication works out, and I get where I'm supposed to go.
Yeah, good for you. Get it figured out. It's amazing how you do once you get down there. You do just figure it out and problem solve, and all of a sudden you're using hand language, or you keep saying one word over and over again, or they kind of give you directions and you kind of try to decipher and figure it out from there. But man, it's tough to learn a new language, especially when as we didn't learn it as kids, or I didn't pay enough attention in high school. I don't remember any of my foreign language, but that would really be helpful down there, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I'm, fortunately growing up, I just grew up in Southeast Idaho, and being an agricultural community, we have a high influx of Spanish speaking families, and I grew up with a lot of Spanish speaking friends. So counting and asking simple things like what or how or where, you don't really remember when you picked it up, but it became part of our vocabulary. So it wasn't super difficult to start picking up, basic language and how to communicate and ask how, where, what, when, the things that are essential to making a situation work out. And then over time you start to learn the nouns. And so then you start, pointing at stuff like a toddler, learning its first language. Now you're just pointing at stuff, and everybody's so friendly. You go to all these places and you suddenly realize why somebody who doesn't speak English is smiling at you so much, is because that's all you can do when you don't understand what someone's saying to you, no matter how slow they speak it, no matter how quietly or fast. And everybody has the same tendency, if the person in front of them doesn't understand the language, is to like slow it down, even though they still aren't going to understand it. Now they're just going to say it to you slower. And so you're still trying to sit there and say no comprende, or hablo lentamente, try to get them to slow it down a little bit. But at the end, you're just smiling a whole bunch and pointing and slapping each other on the back and laughing because neither of you really knows what the other one wants. but you end up getting the communication done, and somehow it always works out. And everybody's just so friendly. You go to these places, and Colombia has its history, and Bolivia has its history. My family, my friends, people wonder, when you go to these places, you don't speak the language, that have histories with drug cartels or issues with, far right wing dictators. Well, what's it like when you go there? I'm sure for the average person living in those places, they would prefer it to be much different. But as a visitor, people are still the same. You're smiling a lot. You're trying to communicate. You're apologizing a lot. It's probably the best thing you can learn, is how to apologize right off the bat. And you're getting help from people, and suddenly you relax. You realize nobody really cares. You don't stick out that much. You're not like a target for anything, and you can just relax. You can take it easy because people are gonna help you out. I've been across both countries, kind of due to circumstances that were beyond anybody's control, where I, in Bolivia, was on a bus for 16 hours across the country because I was messing around taking photos and I missed my jungle flight, and I'm stuck at a jungle airstrip with an indigenous Jesuit priest who speaks Spanish, and I'm using Google Translate on my phone as the sun is setting to negotiate an airplane to come pick me up from the closest city. And I speak English. I don't speak Spanish. Nobody there speaks English. A few of the people only speak a little bit of Spanish and then their indigenous language. But at the end of it all, everybody's super polite. I get put on an airplane. I get flown to the next city. I get on a bus. The bus driver is super nice and knows a little English. The bus breaks down on the side of the road like it would for any South American adventure, and the mechanic replaces the water pump on the side of the road, and everybody gets off the bus and hangs out for a minute. You got people in traditional clothing, you got people in modern clothing, people with animals on the bus, everything you could expect from kind of an underdeveloped nation, and now you're adventuring through it. But the whole time, everything's fine. I've got these huge duffel bags full of camera gear. Nobody messes with me. People help me carry stuff everywhere, and maybe they want a little tip or whatever at the most. But you become more comfortable. Learning the language would add a little bit more comfort to all the situations where I could just communicate a little better. But otherwise, after the first trip to Bolivia and just seeing how nice everybody is, you're a lot more comfortable, even if you're going to end up in a scenario where there's going to be a breakdown in communication and you're going to be struggling to figure out what to do, and so is the person you're communicating with. But at the end of it all, it's just still good people everywhere.
That's really cool to hear. Really cool to hear good people everywhere, willing to help you out. You're not in danger. You figure it out. And then being able to go with the flow when things go wrong. I mean, all of this fishing and backcountry hunting, like, it's all about problem solving. And sometimes those problems are how to catch a Dorado, and sometimes those problems are you missed your jungle plane and got to figure out how to get home. But
yeah.
you just rely upon your skills, and you just keep calm, keep making decisions, and you get there. But that is a wild adventure you had down there. I just can't imagine. Like, a month down there seems like a really good stretch of time to get in the flow or in the beat of the country down there and the people down there and how it all works. It seems like sometimes when you travel for a week, it's just too quick. You don't get in sync with the land or the country or how it goes. But a month seems like a good time down there. So what are some of the extra logistics that someone has to worry about for going down there, as far as, like, I know, get your passport and things, but is there anything that goes along with that? And then geez, you must just bring bags of gear of flies, and do you bring fly tying gear, and then rods? You got to prepare for broken rods. So what are some of the logistics to going to some place that's underdeveloped into a different country like that?
Yeah, so I like to plan as though I'm doing anything here that's the same. Like, what do you need to survive? And I don't necessarily mean that in like a dramatic way, but like you mentioned with backcountry hunting and stuff, eventually you know what you really need minimal for emergency situations. And so I have all this camera gear, and it's like, all right, what camera gear is essential to my project that has to go on the plane with me? And no matter what anybody tries to do, I cannot hand that bag over to be checked, because if those camera bodies and those particular lenses, the laptop, the hard drive, the very essential gear, if that gets lost, the whole project's over, and I might as well just go home. So those are going with me everywhere. The only clothes I have with me when I arrive, other than my checked luggage, which hopefully it's arrived, is what I'm wearing. So I wear what I'm going to need when I get there. Sometimes that means wearing your wading boots onto the airplane, and fishing pants, a net gaiter, your sun gloves, a long sleeve shirt, a hat. Basically, what would you need the first day you were going fishing if your checked luggage didn't show up? As a photographer, your average guy traveling there, these guys are encouraging you to only bring roughly 30 to 40 pounds of gear. So a couple shirts, a couple pairs of pants, socks, things for comfort, and then your fishing gear. 1 week, that's easy to pack for. It's easy to overpack for, but a month, you're right. I need clothes for a month. I need batteries for multiple days of work. I need all the chargers. I need the laptop. I need fishing gear, leaders, flies, everything for a month in an extreme location that has a tendency to ruin things. Most of the jungle's built on sand. You might get sand in camera gear. You might drown your camera gear because you're fishing. You're always in the water. So I start to think about that. And it's taken a few trips to really get it dialed in. And every trip, I feel like I take a little less stuff, or I take another item I find more essential and replace a few items that were heavy and bulky that didn't even need to be going. At first, I was overpacking clothes. Now I realize, I only need 3 or 4 pairs of clothes even for a month because you're in the jungle. They're wet every day. You just wash them every day. Fishing gear, a couple of 10-weight rods. You can bring an 8-weight if you think you're going to target lighter species and you want a lighter weight rod. But really, that 8-weight, while it's good for smaller species, if you break your 10-weight that you brought, now you're trying to catch 20-pound aggressive fish on an 8-weight and throw large streamers. I found that just doesn't work. So now it's take 2 10-weights with me, sinking lines, intermediate lines, floating lines, a streamer box full of big streamers, and really trying to research before I go so I don't take a lot of stuff I don't need. I found that silver, black, red, white, maybe a little olive or something, you can take stuff like that, or fire tiger color. But really, most of these fish are eating silver-colored fish, gray fish. They're bait fish, whether it's sabalo or little sardinata or palmetto or whatever's moving up and down these rivers. They're almost all silver, maybe a little red, maybe a little green. So suddenly, you don't need as many flies, and they don't need to be a whole bunch of colors and a whole bunch of them. I'll bring fly tying materials. Basically, it's all gray again, gray bucktail, gray schlappen, gray marabou, some flash, and some 5/0 hooks and dumbbells. Just minnow patterns, your basic GT minnow patterns will work for all of that stuff, deceivers, whatever. And I'm checking all this luggage because I can't really take flies with me. I can carry my fly rods, my reels, but I can't take flies. They're too big of hooks, and most of the time they'll want you to throw those away because it could be a weapon. So you're hoping that stuff gets there. And I've had luggage not show up. I did 2 months in Bolivia, or 2 weeks in Bolivia without my luggage. It got left in Miami, and it took a while for it to arrive. And I had to go buy some things. I ran to the closest hunting store. American Airlines had to basically cut me a check. So I was like, all right, I'm going to buy everything cool they got in here. It was about impossible to stop me from buying a gun, but turns out, I couldn't have it in the country anyways. But it was like, if American Airlines is paying, I might as well buy a hunting rifle while I'm in here. But, I had to buy everything, clothes, sleeping bag. A lot of these places, you bring a little sleeping bag with you because it'll get chilly at night while most of the day just blistering heat and you're exhausted. And at night, it'll finally cool down. And so like a really light sleeping bag or something. And then I bring a water filter. A lot of these places don't really recommend it or say it's necessary. But I've found that oftentimes, you're in situations without water and without clean water. And a lot of these people down there have adapted. Maybe their gut biome can handle what's in the water, whereas tourists can't. And most Americans, Europeans, whoever, they're going to get diarrhea for a few days when they get there. Especially if you're eating street food, you're kind of diving into the culture. Odds are your stomach's not ready to handle that. And you'll kind of have to adapt to it. I bring a Sawyer S3 water filter. And the reason I bring that particular one is it filters out chemicals like gasoline and pesticides, anything that might be coming from agriculture further upriver. It filters out viruses. So now you've got, cholera or E. coli or anything like that might be in the water, bacteria and viruses. And I'll filter through that. And then your carbon and sediment, the things that you really, don't need serious filtration for. But you go out for a day and it's hot and it's easy to drink through the water. It's easy for people to do that, and having a backup water filter I think is really important, especially if you know yourself. And I'm one of those people that drinks a lot of water. Hunting or fishing, I consume a lot of it. And so I'll carry a water filter even here in Montana because I may drink through a full Nalgene of water in a day's fishing or whatever. You're bringing a pocket knife. You're really starting to think about really, what do you need to survive? Because that's kind of the situation you're in for a month in the jungle.
Man, yeah, that's wild. Just trying to get everything packed to make sure you have everything you need. You talked sleeping bag. Do you also bring your own sleep system, like your own tent, sleeping pad, or most of the time do they have you set up with something like that?
Yeah,
I guess it depends.
They've got that going on. So both locations have lodges with both Angling Frontiers and Fish Columbia. I think this is probably universal for locations that also do expedition stuff, but they've got their base location, which will have large built kitchen, dining, sleeping quarters, bathrooms, more modern style stuff. Even in the middle of the jungle, these guys do amazing at getting the toilet to flush, 1,000 miles away from running water, and so they'll provide those comforts because that does help deal a little bit. Nobody wants to necessarily have to squat in the woods. So they do really well with preparing you with all of that. Then you go on these expeditions, and even then they do amazing at prepping for the comforts that paying anglers, are looking for, tourists. This isn't a roughing it expedition. These guys aren't paying to show up and rough it, even though it's a little bit like that. So you'll move up river and you'll get to their expedition camp areas, and they'll have, again, nice bathroom accommodations, either kind of like a pit toilet or whatever. And they'll have a kitchen set up within like a large dome tent, and then single dome tents for double occupancy clients or workers, whatever. Cots or sleeping pads, they'll have those. But they do want you to bring your own, say, sleeping bag, or I don't even bring a sleeping bag anymore. I found available online or in any outdoor store a simple fleece sleeping bag liner. It's kind of like your polyester fleece, and that's perfect for the jungle. It's not too hot. It breathes better than like a polyester bag where your condensation, I don't know if you ever have this happen in your bag where you kind of get sweaty if the humidity builds up too much in there, and you're waking up sweaty in your bag. I hate that. And so that liner is rated for like 50 or 60 degrees, and that's really the coldest it's going to get there. That's my preferred thing to sleep in. It doesn't start to stink. Super lightweight. You can ball it up into as small as a sweater, or roll it up, and stuff it into a small bag somewhere that's getting carried up and down the river. And then I don't bring a pillow. Again, I'm trying to kind of keep things light and space and use my space for camera gear most of the time. So I just ball up a puffy or a hoodie or something. Even though it's the jungle, you do want to be prepared a little bit for cool weather. Rainstorms will cool things down pretty quick. And probably because they have high humidity there as well. Once it starts raining, you feel it a little more. And one week when I was in Bolivia, a cold front came in from the south, and it got down to maybe 50 degrees or something Fahrenheit. And it was like, I put on a hoodie, I had sweatpants on, I had my down puffy over the hoodie, we were wearing beanies. You were really cold. And, 2 or 3 days before that, it was so hot that you're just hiding in the river to try to stay cool because the jungle is so hot. But it can, just like that, it can get cold. So I'll bring a down puffy or something real small, a hoodie, probably just one hoodie kind of for the whole month, really. They have laundry service at all these places, so they'll go down and they'll have some ladies working for them or something that'll go down and do laundry every day or every other day. So you don't really have to worry about having tons of clothes. But you do want to be prepared for cold, even though it's the hot jungle.
That's smart. Yeah, that makes sense. That wet, damp, cold. That's as cold as it gets, and especially you get a little wind on top of that, you could be in real trouble in a hurry. So yeah, that makes good sense.
And if you guys have shown up without the sleeping bags, 2 months in at Patrick Angling Frontier, Patrick Tindler is the owner of that location with Federico, and you spend 2 months in a location, you get to see kind of what all the clients do. Some are really prepared, over-prepared, under-prepared. You kind of get to see how everybody shows up. And unfortunately, sometimes guys, they get this awesome information packet that Angling Frontiers has produced for people. It lists right in there, bring antifungal because you're going to get foot rot maybe. Bring warm clothes, bring lots of dry socks, foot powder, and a sleeping bag. And, they put all this stuff on there, and you'll have guys show up that did not read that list, and they don't have felt wading boots. And so now they're slipping all over the river. And, you go to Angling Frontiers and in Bolivia up there, you want to be wearing felt wading boots. No matter what your preference is, no matter how confident you are on anything else, you want felt wading boots there. The rocks have been sandblasted by the jungle. by the river and the way it carries sand, and they are just the most polished, smooth bowling balls you've ever been on. People fall all the time. Everybody does. So you have guys show up without felt wading boots. You have guys show up with no sleeping bag. So now you're upriver, the sun's setting. These guys have been out fishing all day. They're wet. They're dry now, but they were wet earlier. So everyone's getting real mellow. And some guy walks up, one of the clients, and he's like, hey, where do I get a sleeping bag? And then this dread, everybody dreads that moment. And it's just like, oh no, now this guy has to ball up, in the fetal position with all of his clothes on that maybe he brought. Hopefully he brought something warm. And he's got to tough out the night. And there's nothing worse than sleeping through a cold night where you're just begging for the sun to come up. Please let it be morning so I can go drink coffee and get out of this tent. And, these poor guys, they show up unprepared. And you want to be comfortable there. It's so much nicer. And you think of these guys who back in the day, forged the path into the jungle and into the mountains, and everywhere they went wearing leather and wool and cotton. And you can only imagine how tough it was for them. And, you're sitting here and you have all of this stuff available, modern conveniences that are light and you can take in there for your comfort. So you kind of want to analyze that out and make sure you're going to be comfortable, or it just beats you up. It wears you out. The hot days, the bugs. Eventually you just get tired, and you see some people who at the end of 8 or 9 days, they're ready to go home, and they're just exhausted. The bugs have bit the hell out of them. They didn't bring long sleeves or long pants, and their legs are swelling from the amount of bug bites they've gotten on their legs, and their feet are swelling. People get beat up down there when they think, I go fishing where bugs bite me, but at the end of the day, I go home. Here, you don't really get to go home. The bugs are going to still be there wherever you're at. And you're prepped for that place. It's kind of torture, and it kind of gives you some anxiety, plus all the camera gear. So sometimes I got to leave stuff behind that I consider essential for my comfort, but it's not going to get to go on this trip. So I've got to figure out if I've got other things that will make do, because it's more important that I have my LED video lights than a battery-powered fan or something to keep me cool at night when it's hot. And so you start kind of learning the things you want, the things you get to take, and the things that have to stay behind.
Man, you have to prioritize. Yeah, it sounds like the planning and the plotting, you really want to do your research and ask questions before you get there. That story of guys not having their sleeping bag or not having warm clothes, like that's a form of torture. When you're cold, like you were saying, waiting for the sun to come up, you're just praying it'll come up, and you can't get any sleep. You're just too cold. Every side you lay on is getting cold. I've been tortured like that too. Yeah, I wouldn't want any part of that, or just not having the right gear when those rainstorms come in at night back at camp. So I can see how that planning is a major piece to the puzzle. And what a great show of endurance on your part to be able to go down there for 4 to 6 weeks down there, photographing and filming and putting this together, and trying to keep all your camera gear working down there has got to be a job in itself. But you've got to also pack everything you need to be able to survive out there and be able to sleep comfortably. So it's a great show of endurance. I would imagine, watching these people break, you start to learn like the importance of toughness and a really good attitude down there as well. And I'm sure there's some clients that just thrive and have a great time, have everything they need, and then you get to see the other side of things, the guys that didn't prepare, didn't bring everything they need, and
about how tough people can be, and the guides really, and even the owners, Beto and Patrick and Federico, and some of the guides I've got to work with, Johan Dupree and Blaine, and Trevor, and these guys, they come from all over, South Africa, Johan and Trevor, and Michigan for Blaine, and then these guys who grow up there, Beto, Patrick, Federico, and these guys, you talk about thriving, and I'm kind of in the middle. I do well. I'm excited to get there. By the end, I'm like, okay, I just want to go home and start editing. I've got so much media. I've got 2 terabytes or a terabyte of media. I've got to go home. I've broken a rod. I'm starting to run out of snacks or whatever, And by the 1 month over, I'm thinking about home as much as I miss it the minute I get home, and I know I'm going to. after a month or 5 weeks, I'm starting to miss my home, my dogs, my wife. And these guys, they live there all season. They miss it so much when they're gone. And they have to make sacrifices in their lives for that. They disappear into the jungle for months. Whatever their season is, they're gone, and their lives at home are put on pause, and they miss a lot of what's going on in the world because they're isolated. And even if there's a satellite there picking up Wi-Fi in the evenings, you're really not a part of what's going on in society. And these guys, their mental toughness, their preparedness, they learn what they need and what they don't need, and then they just live there. And I believe, Beto at Fish Columbia, he just decided to stay in the jungle because of the quarantine and everything, or the isolations going on back in Bogota. He just stayed there, and so he's living off of piranha and bass and hanging out with the guys who are mixed indigenous locals that work for him and live there. And he's just living the jungle life. That's how much these guys love it. They would rather still be there in the heat or in the rain, the bugs, sleeping in their hammock or whatever. And coming back home, I think, is tough for them. They come back home and they've got to participate in what we consider, normal society, grocery shopping or paying bills, or the run-of-mill daily life that can be so boring. And it really hits these guys hard, and you can tell they can't wait to get to their next location, to be living out of a backpack again, whether it's the guides who seasonally change from one spot to the next. When I was in Colombia, we had a rainstorm come through, middle of the night. And in the jungle, the rain, again, is never what you want. So we're laying there middle of the night, and rain starts hitting the tent. And we start laughing. Me, Beto, and Blaine were laying there and we're laughing because it's starting to rain. And we know it's going to rain so hard, everybody's going to end up soaking wet before the sun comes up. So now our tent's starting to fill with water. The rain's gotten through, the tent's starting to fill. So now we've all found the corner where the least amount of water is. We're all piled up, basically laughing through this rainstorm. Everybody's getting soaked. And Blaine wakes up, puts on his rain clothes, lays on his stomach, just goes back to sleep. While getting poured on, he's just sleeping in his rain clothes. Beto just pulls the sheet up over his head. It goes back to sleep. He just laughs through it, falls back to sleep. I leave the tent. I'm like, I can't do this. So he takes my mattress, my air pad, stacks his on top of it so he can get off the water floor. I grab my gear and I go to the kitchen tent area, take a bunch of life jackets, throw them on the sand, throw my sleeping blanket thing down, and fall asleep in that area, face down on the ground while it just pours rain. And these guys just sleep through it. For me, I'm like, I've got to go make shelter. I've got to get out of this rain. I can't just lay here. You guys are crazy. They just sleep right through it. They're tough as nails. In the morning, they wake up, just laugh it off. And to them, it's just another day in the jungle. For me, it's a panic situation that maybe I'm relaxed at the end of it all, but not like Blaine, who just puts on his rain jacket, his rain pants, lays back on a soaking wet mattress, goes back to sleep. Beto, who just lets it pour on his face like an old cartoon, where there's a stream of rain coming in from every part of the ceiling is just like a different little stream of dripping water. And these guys are just hardcore. I even tap out at a certain point where it seems like they can't get enough of it.
Man, yeah, that's true grit. That's toughness, and that's those guys in their true element. They've now adapted to that environment and can thrive in it, like you say, and that's commendable. It's man, that's just that's really cool, because it does take that to be away from your family and away from home that long. Man, the draw of those fish, it must be worth it in the end, those experiences you have down in the jungle. And it just from, thanks so much, Wes, for coming on and just describing the whole experience. I almost feel like I've been there even though I haven't, but I have to make a point to get down there at least once in my life. Man, through your photos and through your video and now through your spoken word, that place truly sounds like fun and one of the last great wildernesses left.
It really is. There's certain places that have just been developed, and the United States, we've got our national park system, we've got our state forests, and they're beautiful places, but they've all got roads, they've all got maintenance to them. And maybe you get into northern Canada and you get into Alaska, then you start to find undeveloped North American areas. you get down there and it's just a short plane flight into a totally different world, and they are kind of the last vestiges of wilderness and rainforest, which unfortunately we watch every year. It kind of gets developed a little more, and they kind of have to develop. These countries can't stay underdeveloped just so we can appreciate the jungle. And they're trying to find a balance there. The world's watching these countries and wondering how they'll develop and if they'll log their jungles and turn them into agricultural lands like so many other areas have. You want to go enjoy them while you can, because those countries aren't going to just hold themselves back so that we have places to enjoy that that we no longer have up here.
You're so right.
Everything's, and that may mean the rainforest.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, that's exactly right. Everything's always changing, and we have to take advantage of the things around us while they're here and while they're good. You couldn't be more spot on, Wesley. Man, it's just got to be amazing to travel down there. Well, you're just as accomplished of a fly fisherman in the States and for brown trout and giant fish. But it's really fun to hear about some of your South American adventures down there. So we get through this whole pandemic. We got to get together again and do some fishing and get out and have some fun. But man, thanks so much for sharing.
Absolutely, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Again, just super fascinating conversation with Wesley White. Just what an adventure down there. I have got to book one of those trips. I've got to just save my pennies and book a trip and get to South America. I've got to catch one of those Dorado. And to be honest, my brown trout fishing lately, I almost feel like I'm fishing for Dorado. I know it's not. I know they're giant fish and they jump and they're super aggressive, but you also have to enjoy what's right around you, and I love brown trout. Brown trout have to be one of my favorite to fish for, especially when they're aggressive and they're sitting in these rivers. And so lately, you guys know how crazy I've been off streamers. I've just committed to it and just fishing miles and miles of river until I find that one fish that'll eat it. And I've been doing pretty good, but hooking those big aggressive fish out in that river, just I'll be strip pull, or maybe I'll be swinging it, and all of a sudden there's just this golden explosion of this fish that lights that thing up. And the brown trout that I catch off this thing are usually all over 20 inches, and so they're good, hard fighting fish that you want to touch and see. And that, not that I don't appreciate every fish, but there's just something about when you catch a specimen of a fish, just a great big one, golden color. Just living in its prime, and to be able to have like a couple minutes to fight that fish, and then a minute in the water, just like appreciating what just went down. Man, it's so awesome. So I've just been having a blast. Fish Saturday and Sunday, and Thursday after work. So getting in a bunch of days, and like I say, enjoying what's right around me. I have so many great streams around me and so many big brown trout. It's been just a riot lately. So really having fun with that, having fun with this podcast. Sure appreciate the support. It's just so humbling, again, remembering, to start a podcast over from scratch and try to build an audience and a following. And I was so fortunate. Eastmans Elevated, my other podcast on the hunting side of things, it just took off relatively quickly. And, not that this hasn't, but it just makes me so fortunate the position I'm in, and to be able to have a successful podcast, and just makes me want to work harder at that one. This week we have an awesome podcast on that side of things, on the hunting side. I did a virtual hunting camp with a bunch of my really good buddies. So we got everybody on Skype. We have Remy Warren on there, David Wise, 2-time Olympic gold medalist skier, and then 3 of my really good buddies from Hawaii, Janus Padilla, Sean Curran, and Robin Keene. So just some of my best friends on there that I share hunts with, and so we cut it up back and forth and rib each other. We just had a great time. So you can check that out over on the Eastmans Elevated podcast. And we'll just try to keep this Eastman's Flycast rolling here, and try to build it into something. So I sure appreciate all the support, you guys. It really means a lot, especially in the beginning phase. I mean, it always means a lot to me, but in this beginning phase, to have people that believe in it and subscribe to the podcast, follow the IG page, means the world to me. So thanks, you guys. Just continue trying to bring you that next level content, and make you a better fisherman, and hopefully some entertainment along the way. So with that, let's wrap it up. I'm going to do another solo podcast this week, so I'll get after it either a morning or an evening, record a solo podcast, all my fishing adventures lately. I've had some, oh my gosh. If you fish enough, bad things happen, and I hate I hate making stupid moves. I hate making bonehead moves, forgetting something, or, and you have to make sure that you never make them with your boat, with your trailer hitch, the whole deal. But eventually in life, if you fish long enough, you just make some mistakes. So, I mean, I can wade the river like nobody else, and especially with the felt, it's just so grippy, and even slick rivers and tough wades, no problem. But the other day, I kicked this big rock and went straight over into the drink and just soaked my arms. I was wading a couple miles worth of river. I just kicked this rock, and there was no way to catch myself. I went straight down in the river. That was one bonehead move I made. And then, I made a bad one the other day. I've got it all fixed now. I've got the rod replaced, but I was fishing the front of the boat, and my dad was oaring me down. And I was making long casts. It was a sinking line, fishing that streamer. And the belly of my line got in the water somehow as I was casting and stripping in, and it hooked a rock. And so all of a sudden I'm into a rodeo where the loop of my line now is hooked around a rock. We can't pull over the boat or stop. It's too quick. And things are just happening quick. And I try to grab my line, and then the line grabs, snaps my rod, and then sends 3/4 of my rod into the drink. So I'm just left holding my handle, the fly line. Luckily I didn't lose the line too. I'll talk about it on the solo podcast. I'm so mad at myself, but there's nothing you can do. Let it ruin your fishing day. And really, it was a new Temple Fork 7-weight. I told him what happened, and the warranty that I stand behind it, even though I'm missing 3/4 of my rod because I snapped it off in the drink and there was no way to get it. Oh, just killed me. But anyways, I'll record a solo podcast, talk about a couple of my mishaps, and also a few of my successes too, catching some good fish and catching fish off dry flies, and just some good springtime fishing, different rivers. Super pumped. So thanks you guys for the support. I appreciate it. Check in with you next week.